Hey, it's Kermit Weeks here at Fantasy of Flight, and I'm sitting here in our little editing room going over some of the footage that we did for our Spirit of St. Louis trip that we took over to Paris, France. We were invited there by the Air Club of France about 6 months before the event to actually take our example over there and be part of the 100th anniversary of the Le Bourget Airport. Of course, everybody knows a famous part of that airport history was when Charles Lindbergh landed from New York in the Spirit of St. Louis, and I think they felt that their celebration wouldn't be complete without an example. Unfortunately, there were none in Europe, and we were really the only option in the United States. So we cut a deal, and initially when we looked into how we were going to ship the airplane over there, one of the problems was the wingspan on the Spirit of St. Louis is 46 feet in span, and of course most shipping containers are 40 feet, and it obviously wouldn't fit inside. There were some options for some longer containers, but unfortunately there were some difficulties in which ports would accept the longer containers, and also the shipping of the longer container over some of the French roads. So eventually it was decided they got some funding to use Air France cargo. Air freight was how we were going to ship it, with DHL as a shipper, and it was all insured by. And so we went through the process of putting the airplane on a stand and doing the best we could to make it as safe as possible to ship the airplane over without any damage. Unfortunately, it sustained damage not only going over, it sustained damage coming back, and this is basically the story. Okay, so this is the shipping stand that we came up with to put the airplane in. Here we are lifting the upper wing off. We've already cut the balsa wood fairings. Now we've set the top wing onto the stand. Notice here how clean the leading edge is. There's no scuffing. Of course, you can see there's no broken glass. There's no damaged end there. And this trailing edge here, there's nothing wrong with it. And once we got the wing on, then we had to worry about the fuselage. So we went ahead and got the fuselage set inside, put the wing back on top. We basically used a lot of the stand to get all the parts on the inside. So the only thing that was really extraneous was that little center section piece there on the top wing over the cockpit. Of course, we wrapped the thing with bubble wrap because we knew that the trucker was going to bring down a tarp. We were very particular about making sure that this thing was going to be safely shipped. We are putting some more bubble wrap on. Paid a lot of attention to make sure there was no chafing, wasn't going to be any damage. Of course, here the trucker's arriving. Right there, that one piece sticking out. He's walking around looking at what we've done so far, and I question whether or not that's going to be an issue. And he talks about putting some padding on it, and of course everything's good in one piece right there. Now we're rolling it out to put it up on the trailer. Setting it down, everything seems to fit okay. Of course, we're chaining the stand down to the trailer. And he had brought this really cool tarp down. I mean, it was a really cool tarp. There he is putting some carpet and some things down on that part that we were concerned about. And basically, we're laying the tarp over there. We were very careful about, how much we tighten things down with any kind of straps or anything, knowing the fragility of the wing. Of course, by the end of the deal, it looked like some kind of a secret black project the government was hauling it down the interstate. You can also see that we started very early in the day with this in the morning, and by evening is when we finally got this thing done. So we paid a lot of attention to make sure that this thing was going to be shipped safely and without any damage. Here we are going out the Fantasy of Flight gate with sun well have set and the light just about gone. It was heading up to the Atlanta airport. It's where it was going to be air freighted over to Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, France. Here's a shot taken from one of the shippers. They basically reported that there was no damage. They didn't notice any. I don't know how much they looked, but obviously the tarp had been taken off. The airplane was delivered prior to my guys showing up, and they eventually showed up to find this damage. And we were, of course, not happy. They immediately contacted the insurance agents. Air France came out, DHL Cargo, and basically they did a report, and then they spent 7 days restoring the airplane for the anniversary. This was all in a secured hangar where you had to have a security clearance to get in, so it's not like the general public, you know, had access to the airplane.
July 2014, we are here in Le Bourget for the 100th anniversary of the airport. Of course, this is the famous airport where Charles Lindbergh landed in 1927, and I've been invited here by people to bring my airplane.
Here we are rolling the airplane out to the event, and of course it's raining, so if you ever want to have if you ever have a drought and you want to solve the problem, host either an air show or an aerobatic contest, and guaranteed to get some rain.
Cool.
There we are, all pretty much set up. Everybody's starting to enjoy the airplane, taking a look at it. So basically, the airplane was disassembled, shipped back to Fantasy of Flight, air freight back to Air France, and as you can see, it was not wrapped the way we did when it left. Very early on, I had some concern about that, the way the thing was ratcheted down with the straps. Obviously, there was some potential chafing with the way that it had been wrapped with the bubble wrap and other things. So here we are basically taking it off the trailer, and we're going to roll it inside, and we'd already suspected that there was, you know, some issues in the shipping again. Obviously, we started finding some damage, and I started taking pictures. There was chafing damage, there was some other bent trailing edges. This time they had tried to, you know, do the best they could, and there was a gentleman that was actually, his sole purpose was to ride with the airplane all the way over. That's him right there, and I'm sure he was very surprised to find all this, because he was supposed to have stayed with the airplane the whole time. So I'm sitting here documenting this. Obviously, I wasn't in Paris when the airplane arrived at Le Bourget, but I was here when it came back, and so here I am documenting with my own camera, you know, all the damage. There, somebody obviously has just ratcheted the wing down, bent the trailing edge with no regard or at least understanding of how fragile the airplane was in certain places.
How do we sign this off and say, you know, this is, you know,
So here I am trying to figure out, you know, what are we going to do? How are we going to document this? How are we going to, you know, figure out the issue? And I basically thought, well, okay, this is what we should do. Why don't I make a CD, and we'll make like 4 copies, and I gave him 2 and me 2, and we signed all 4 of them. So each one of us has a signed copy of the damage as it arrived at Fantasy of Flight from Paris. The airplane was obviously not damaged when it left Fantasy of Flight, and my guys had fixed most of the damage for the event at Le Bourget, and it was in good condition, at least, you know, from a static point of view, prior to leaving Le Bourget. And here we are back at Fantasy of Flight with more damage. It's before and after, lots of cracks from something. That's before. And now you see all the chafing. And that was when it came back. That's before it left. Now we've got, chips in the paint. Broken trailing edges because somebody ratcheted it down too tight. No broken glass. Here it is broken. Of course, here it is before the back end, and that's the damage after. So as you can see by the video, we basically did the best we could to let this thing leave as safely as possible. Unfortunately, it was accepted at the Le Bourget hangar, a secured hangar, before my guys got there a couple of days later. And everybody was notified, DHL, I believe the insurance people there in Air France Cargo, they came out, they assessed everything, they documented it with photographs, and of course now the focus was to get the airplane statically presentable, not airworthy, but basically just to fix it so it looked good for the show. My guys focused on that. We're all under the assumption this is being taken care of behind the scenes and paperwork's being processed for a claim, okay? And so basically, then when the airplane came back, and with somebody actually riding with the airplane the whole way, we tried to figure out how we were going to document the additional damage on the way home that was plainly obvious because we videoed it as it arrived. And we came up with this idea of doing the CDs of the pictures that we documented. That was the date. This is my signature. This is the signature of the DHL representative. It even says DHL on the bottom here. And in the process, while this was happening, assuming that everything was going on behind the scenes to get a claim, we went out and had a couple of estimates done by an outside source, so we weren't being, putting an unfair price on it. And basically, the wing needs to be uncovered. It needs to be inspected for other possible damage, and it needs to be eventually recovered. As an example, like the trailing edge pieces that somebody ratcheted down and bent there, the only way to fix that is not to cut a piece out and put a piece in and wrap a patch around there to make it back to the way it was when it left. The wing's got to be uncovered. The whole trailing edge piece has got to be repaired, or replaced. So basically, we had estimates done, and based on time and materials and how much it was going to take to do, it was in the rough neighborhood of about $. We had done all this in anticipation of the insurance company basically asking us for some quotes, and unfortunately, we were very disappointed and very surprised that after going back and forth a few times by email, this was the ultimate response, and I quote, "Dear all, I confirm the position of DHL and our insurers as explained, and due to the survey organized, the damage was not originating from transport. The surveyor mandated by Air France has the same analysis. For us, from an insurance point of view, this file is definitely closed. Signed, the DHL Claims and Risk Manager." Did we get or what?